I'm calling this meeting to order. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. May I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Greenberg?
Here.
Mrs. Christensen?
Here.
Dr. Lim? President Pantera?
Here.
Ms. Wani?
Here.
Next on the agenda is approval of agenda. Dr. Corson.
Thank you, President Pantera. Items approved by consent will not come up for discussion during the meeting, but will be approved when the agenda is adopted. This is possible since members of the governing board received the agenda along with backup materials at least 24 hours prior to the meeting and have had time to review and consider all items. Prior to the agenda being adopted, members of the governing board may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and brought to the floor for discussion at the appropriate place on the agenda. Any member of the audience who submitted a blue public comment card prior to the start of the meeting will be recognized to speak on that agenda item under items for approval. I'd like to offer the agenda as posted.
Thank you, Dr. Corson. Prior to the start of the meeting, no blue public comment cards were received. So for that reason, no items are needed to be removed from the consent agenda. Does any member of the governing board wish to have an item removed from the consent agenda? Mrs. Christensen?
Item F5.
F5 will now become one of the Gs. And that's the only one, right? Okay. G6 is it? I'm skipping ahead here. Yep. Thank you, Dr. Corson. G6. I'm making a notation so I don't skip it. Thank you. Okay, we've moved that one, so we're voting on everything except item 5. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstention? Motion passes unanimously, 3 votes with nothing else. 4.
And
Oh, online. That always gets me. 4. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is governing board statements. Would anyone like to go first? Anybody? Nobody wants to go first? Ms. Wani?
Welcome. Happy summer. It's hot outside, and I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Christensen?
Yes, thank you, President Pantera. I just want to welcome everybody here today. I see some people that are running for office, so welcome all you potential governing board members. And I just want to say hello to everyone here and online. Thank you for joining us today. This is your meeting. We are here to serve you. So,
Dr. Lim?
All right. Well, I'll say a few more words than that. So we just came off our board retreat. So I just wanted to take a moment, maybe to talk to the room, but also to talk to our board at the same time. So we just came off our board retreat. Julie Bacon from ASBA helped facilitate our retreat. I think we often sit up here and say thank you to everyone out there for making the district happen, but if you don't know, we are unpaid elected officials and sit up here every single time we're up here and all the work we do in between. unpaid. So we're doing this on a volunteer basis. So I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to the board. It was an amazing retreat. We all connected in so many different ways. And in a world where we could not get along, we are doing so well up here. So thank you to everyone who sits up here on the board for giving your time and for being here. That retreat was just a reminder that we're all here for the same reason and we all want what's best for students. So thank you for the retreat, and we appreciate continuing to serve together.
Mrs. Greenberg.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I could not be with you in person, but we have out-of-town visitors, including my granddaughter here, and so I'm doing. We're trying to get multiple visits in, but I appreciate our IT department helping me connect online, and I hope everybody's having a great summer. Thanks.
Thank you. As far as my comments, I know you did mention your grandchildren. I've got 3 grandchildren here in the Valley now. Hopefully they'll all go to our school, start enrolling in PV this fall. But they're finding things to do. You know, what do I do now? Thank goodness we have a lot of programs in our district. We have the public library, which is a great place to go, you know, with the kids. It's one of those things, though, that I love school choice, but sometimes I wonder we have kids don't know each other in their neighborhood because they're so busy going to other schools in other neighborhoods. That's kind of a downside of the whole choice thing. I went to the Arizona School Board Association Summer Summit there in Flagstaff and learned a lot of things. But one thing was, I always buy a book one of these things. This time I got this one called Significance in Simple Moments, okay, by a guy named John Petz. Look him up. It's a pretty cool guy. He talks about, and the reason I'm talking about it now is, one thing he talks about is the simple things and the people who sometimes say, well, I'm just a volunteer, or I'm just a teacher, or I'm just this or just that. And they downplay their impact that they have and a way of celebrating the impact they have. Because every single person in this district, every staff member is not a just. You're not just a custodian, you're not just a teacher. You're that student, that child's contact with education. There's nothing just about you. I just want to remind you that I know that, and I see that every day. And we foster that kind of place here, that kind of thought here. We're not a cog in a machine, but we're members of families. And thank you for your continued efforts in that regard. And that concludes my comments. Next on the agenda is superintendent comments. Dr. Corson.
Thank you, President Pantera. Well, speaking of things to do over the summer, our Community Education Department is currently hosting a variety of summer programs and sports camps running now through July. Whether your child is interested in sports, animation, cooking, or something STEAM-related, there are plenty of opportunities to choose from for students in kindergarten through 6th grade. It's not too late to secure a place in our July elementary sessions. The registration deadline is July 1st. To register, visit pvschools.net and select the Programs tab. I'm also thrilled to announce that Paradise Valley High School has produced 3 semifinalists for the U.S. Presidential Scholars in Career and Technical Education: Geet Joshi, Pravna Raj Vipaguntha, and Liam Whelan. This prestigious recognition highlights not only their individual academic excellence and leadership, but also the commitment of our faculty in fostering a supportive learning environment. Please join me in congratulating these talented students for their remarkable achievement and the pride they bring to our district. I'm also proud to recognize our Marketing and Communications Department. For the 4th consecutive year, the team has earned prestigious state and national accolades. This year's honors include National Awards of Excellence for Social Media and Video Production, as well as a coveted Golden Achievement Award for their impactful, Seriously Social Report Don't Repost Safety campaign. Beyond these awards, our staff is increasingly recognized as industry leaders, having been invited to present at professional conferences and serve on leadership committees and the executive board overseeing statewide professional development. Please join me in congratulating our marketing and communication team on these impressive achievements. And President Pantera, that concludes my comments for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Corson. Next on the agenda is items for approval G1. Consider, discuss, amend if desired, and if deemed advisable, adopt resolution number 604, approving the governing board's argument in support of the special maintenance and operation budget override election. Dr. Corson.
Thank you, President Pantera, members of the Governing Board, Cabinet, and guests tonight. As the Governing Board will recall, on May 14th, you took action to call for a November 2026 election. Tonight, we bring forward resolution number 604, along with a proposed argument for the board's consideration and approval. Under Arizona election law, governing boards have the opportunity to submit a written argument in support of a ballot measure. The proposed argument before you this evening has been drafted in accordance with those requirements, including the 200-word limit, and must be submitted to the Maricopa County School Superintendent by August 7th. Should the board approve the resolution of the proposed argument tonight, district staff will complete the required submission and ensure all election timelines and requirements are met. With that, I'll turn it over for any additional information and board discussion.
May I have a motion to adopt resolution number 604, approving the governing board's argument in support of the special maintenance and operation budget override election as presented?
So moved.
Any board members wishing to make a comment? Ms. Wani?
I just have a proposed revision just for the first paragraph. And my thinking here is when this goes before voters, it will be in November. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. So our state did just recently approve a budget, but that won't feel as recent in November. And I think maybe just could possibly be a little confusing to start it with the recently approved budget. So my recommendation would be that we delete that first with the recently approved budget and instead start with Arizona state funding for public education remains well below national average and does not account for, and I just added rising costs for inflation, period. And then one further suggestion to start that second sentence, as a result, comma, district dollars won't go as far to provide the journey of educational excellence our students deserve.
Mrs. Christensen?
So, yeah, just a recommendation. You would have to make a motion to do that, and then somebody would have to second it, so just helping a little bit.
So I would like to propose a motion to make the revisions as I previously stated a moment ago, and I'm happy to read them again.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of discussing this? Well, we discuss it before we vote on it, right? Right, so go ahead.
So again, yeah, my thinking there is just to ensure that the timeliness of the statement, and thinking about it coming up in November, just removing that recently approved budget, because it is recent now as we're reading this, but it won't feel so recent then, and making those minor adjustments for clarity.
President Pantera, could
You
you
want me to read
repeat
again?
it? I just want to make sure we
Absolutely,
got
yeah.
it right.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So just deleting with the recently approved budget gone and instead start with Arizona state funding for public education remains well below national averages and does not account for rising inflation costs, period. As a result, comma, district dollars won't go as far to provide the journey of educational excellence our students deserve, period.
Does everyone get that? Any other comments regarding this proposed change?
President Pantera, this is Mrs. Greenberg.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Wani, I think those are great changes. Are we still within the 200-word limit? I don't have it in front of me, so can't count.
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear.
Ms. Greenberg is asking whether we're still within the 200-word limit with that addition or change.
Yep, she removed 5 words, she added 5 words.
Excellent, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mrs. Greenberg?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Okay. So, all in favor of the proposed changes, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
I didn't vote, sorry. I will approve the changes, yes. Aye.
Okay, so that's just voting on the changes. Now we vote on the complete measure. So all those in favor of the resolution number 604 has it been amended, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So it passes 4 ayes to 1 nay. All right. Next on the agenda is items for approval. G2, consider, discuss, amend if desired, and if deemed advisable, adopt resolution number 605, approving the governing board's argument in support of the district additional assistance budget override election. Dr. Corson.
Thank you, President Pantera, members of the governing board, cabinet, and guests. The next item is similar in nature to the one you just considered and approved. We're bringing forward resolution number 605 and the accompanying proposed for argument related to the November 2026 election for the board's consideration and approval. As with the previous item, approval tonight will allow district staff to submit the required materials to the Maricopa County School Superintendent within the established election timeline. I'd be happy to answer any questions before the board begins its discussion, and we are recommending approval.
Thank you, Dr. Corson. May I have a motion to adopt resolution number 605, approving the governing board's argument in support of the district additional assistance budget override election as presented?
So moved.
Any board members wishing to make a comment? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4 ayes to 1 nay. Next on the agenda is items for approval G3, public hearing for truth in taxation notice of tax increase and public hearing for fiscal year 2026-27 school district annual budget and expenditure of insurance proceeds, followed by consideration and approval of the fiscal year 2026-2027 State of Arizona School District annual budget expenditure of insurance proceeds. Mrs. Berrigan.
Thank you, President Pantera, Governing Board, and Dr. Corson. I will be resharing with you, as mentioned, the presentation that I presented to the Governing Board and the public on June 4th. It is almost identical. I did add in 2 slides because the difference between June 4th and June 18th is we do have now a state budget. So there are just a couple of pieces I wanted to add in to share with the board and have us all start to think about. I won't spend as much time, but if there is a slide that you do have a question on or want me to spend a little more time on, please feel free to let me know. As I shared last time, this slide is not new, but our aggregate expenditure limit was approved previously last year by last year's legislature. So we have an approval of that override for this current fiscal year as well as for next year. We didn't have to go through that again this legislative session, but we will for next legislative session. If our legislature had not overridden the aggregate expenditure limit between fiscal years 2022 and fiscal years 2026, so for 5 fiscal years, we would have missed out on $6.2 billion in state funding for public education, and specifically for school districts, as charter schools are not subject to the aggregate expenditure limit. This is one of the new slides with our K-12 finance updates. If you don't know, there are a lot of continuing resolutions, so there are different ways that measures can appear on a ballot. One of those ways is for the legislature to pass a continuing resolution either in the Senate or the House, and those can be on our ballot. So we are going to have a number of those this November. And one of those in particular that pertains to school districts, again, not to charter schools, just school districts, is SCR 1032. So it is subject to voter approval, but the legislature did pass that on the last day of the legislative session. That would require 60% of operational expenditures on direct instructional expenses. There isn't a definition of direct instructional expenses at this time. The legislation included a requirement of the Office of the Auditor General to determine what qualifies as direct instructional expenses. But using the current classroom spending methodology that I currently present and is shared with Governing Board and the public each March, right now PV schools is at 55.5% for classroom instruction. Is that going to be the same definition that the Office of the Auditor General uses for direct instruction? I don't know, but presumably it'll be somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, for us, that's compared to a statewide average of 52.1%. So we are doing better than the statewide average, but still it would be 4.5% away from the 60% required by the statute. That would begin in fiscal year '28. School districts would have multiple years to get up to the 60% threshold as long as they're making a jump by 0.5% each year. There's no additional funding to help school districts meet this requirement. And to achieve compliance, many districts are going to have to start to look at ways to reduce the other areas, again, assuming the methodology that's going to be used is the classroom spending report. On the classroom spending report, those other categories include transportation, plant operations and maintenance, food service, instructional support, student support, and administration. And, you know, a lot of people would look in particular at the categories of instructional support and student support and consider those direct instructional expenses. If that were to be the case, then we would be well above the 60% threshold. Districts who fail to meet that requirement would face reductions in classroom site fund. And as a reminder, our classroom site fund can be used for teacher salaries and benefits, and that is what we use our classroom site fund dollars for. Penalties increase each year that a district isn't in noncompliance and could ultimately result in the complete loss of classroom site fund allocations. So that is all new information on that Senate continuing resolution. Back to the information you had seen previously. For our revenue changes, you have our average daily membership estimates. As a reminder, for the budget proposal and budget adoption, we estimate our average daily membership a little bit higher so we don't lose out on any capacity for our M&O override. And the expected base level amount, or the amount of funding that we get per student that came through in the budget, is the number that we expected, $5,215.53 per student. Additionally, we'd already known that for classroom site fund, our per student amount that we're getting is $41 per weighted ADM more than we did in the previous year. With our expenditure factors, these were the expenditures that were taken into account after our bargaining with each of our groups. And you'd seen this in April when Dr. Holmes presented it, and this was in the last presentation as well. As was this is a reminder of our assumed or known expenses for next fiscal year, one of those being minimum wage, still at an estimate because we don't have the required CPI or the adjustment for the minimum wage until the September timeframe when it measures August to August CPI or inflation. Our utility cost increases are very slight ASRS or retirement system decrease. And then the medical cost increase, as a reminder, was covered by our medical prepay balance. These just list the fund amounts that we're budgeting for the funds that we have primarily for next year. Our operating funds, our capital funds, our federal and state grants, our debt service, and then all of our other funds fall under that $32.3 million. I do tend to think that the tax rates are some of the most important information in here. So as a reminder, our tax rate for fiscal year 25-26 between the combined primary and secondary was 5.0886, and the estimate for 26-27, and it is just an estimate at this point, is 4.9201, which is about a little under 17 cents less per $100,000 of assessed value from this year moving into next year. But we do have our truth in taxation piece, and as a reminder, this has been required since 1997, and it compares against what our adjacent ways or what our the other options that we have. There are a few other options, but adjacent ways is the only portion we use that falls under truth in taxation. Those were $0 in 1997, so it's always requiring us to compare against $0 versus comparing against a prior year, which might be more meaningful to the average taxpayer. Our adjacent ways budget for next year is an additional levy of $2.1 million. Just to put that a little bit into perspective, that's less than 0.5% of our total budget expected for next year. The legal requirements are that if we have a proposed budget that requires truth in taxation, we have this hearing, and we publish that information in the paper, which was published on June 4th. We hold that public hearing to adopt a budget, roll call to approve that increase, and notify our Property Tax Oversight Commission after the board makes their vote. This is the notice of truth in taxation that was posted in the paper, an exact copy of all of the verbiage. And just the pieces, I think, to put it into a more meaningful context for our taxpayers, rather than how it reads with the increase of $4 and about 16 cents per $100,000 of assessed value. Again, that's the comparison of the $0 that it was in 1997 to fiscal year 27. Our fiscal year 25-26 adjacent ways tax was actually $2.23. So the increase to the adjacent ways portion is about $1.93 per $100,000 of assessed value, which would be about 16 cents per month more per $100,000 of assessed value. So you can multiply that out times your assessed value. And as a reminder, assessed value isn't the resale value of your home, it is the tax value of your home that you see on your tax bill, which is much less than the resale value. And a reminder of what adjacent ways includes, that's for improving our parcels that are adjacent to our properties. That includes things such as sidewalks, sewers, utility lines, and so forth, as well as ensuring safe ingress and egress or entry and exit from our properties. And most of what we do is related to bus lanes and fire lanes. Our adjacent ways projects projected for next year are an elementary school rebuild, so the fire lane ingress and egress of that campus. Removal, replacement, and/or sealing of the following campuses: Campobello, Greyhawk, Palomino, North Canyon, and Air Libre. And then finally, as a reminder, our transparency and accountability. We do have a one-pager over here if anybody wants to look into that more in detail. And these are just a few items because, as a reminder, Title 15, which dictates Arizona Education Code, is about that thick, and I think it's about a 5-by-9 book. And it only increases each year. It's not decreasing. Most of that applies to school districts. Some portions of that apply to charter schools. There's, I think, around 1,500 statutes right now, and there's about a half dozen that apply to private schools. None used to apply to private schools, but as a reminder, private schools do receive public funds now through ESAs and have for a few years. So you'll see that there's a green check mark in almost every column for the school districts and some of the columns for charters, and in very few for the private schools. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Berrigan. May I have a motion to approve fiscal year 2026-2027 State of Arizona School District Annual Budget Expenditure of Insurance Proceeds as presented?
So moved.
Any board members wishing to make a comment?
Mr. Pantera, this is Mrs. Greenberg.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Berrigan, if I heard you correctly and saw that correctly, you said that in SCR 1032, districts that are in non-compliance could see their classroom site fund allocations reduced. Is the classroom site fund allocation considered in classroom dollars?
It is.
So in other words, districts that are having a harder time reaching that 60% are going to have an even harder time because their CSF allocation is going to go down.
That would be correct.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Dr. Lim?
Yeah, so forgive me for not understanding all the connections. I just want to make sure. So I know Prop 132 didn't get renewed, at least in the budget that was proposed and approved. How might that affect our budget, or is this something that's completely inconsequential here? Like, can you tell me how those might connect or not connect in this thought process?
Yeah, Dr. Lim, it's Prop 123. That's okay.
Yes.
They're hard to remember. It did not get renewed in this legislative session. We did not adopt a budget that expected that, so we don't have to revise our budget in any way, shape, or form. But they do need to have discussions moving forward about if we're going to continue to have 123 moving forward, what that will look like. So,
Great, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Mrs. Christensen?
Yes, I have some questions about the adjacent ways projected projects. Each year, we look at replacing asphalt or removal or sealed. How many of these projects are actual removals? Because I know that quite often we've seen asphalt removed all the way to the dirt and totally replaced.
I don't think any of these are removals. Dr. Davis, do you recall? Okay.
And what is the difference in cost to us when we totally replace versus, I know it depends on average, the square area and all of that, but just typically, is there a percentage that, or it just depends? Okay. Okay.
Any other comments, questions? May I have a roll call vote then?
Mrs. Greenberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Christensen,
Aye.
Dr. Lim,
Aye.
President Pantera,
Aye.
Ms. Wani,
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Next on the agenda is items for approval. G4, consideration and approval of new courses and revisions for the 2027-2028 high school course catalog. Dr. Sweeney.
Yes, good evening, President Pantera, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Corson, and guests. We offer for your approval the proposed changes to the 27-28 high school course catalog. As a reminder, this is about 5 months ahead of what has been practiced in the past, and so this is to have everything improved and ready to go, so when students register in January of 27, everything is good. So I want to thank Jackie Clayton and all the counselors who worked on that. As I said, I do recommend approval, and if you have any additional questions, I'm glad to happy to answer them, or Jackie is here as well.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the new courses and revisions for the 2027-2028 high school course catalog as presented?
So moved.
Any board members wishing to make a comment? I'm listening for the voice in the sky.
Just a quick thank you. I mean, I'm sure this is very comprehensive, and we received a lot of very detailed information in a couple of different formats, depending on what kind of level of scrutiny you wanted to maybe have, depending on, how deep you wanted to go. And I appreciate it, and I appreciate the longer timeline. So just thank you, and a recognition that it was a heavy lift, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I do want to mention that there is a group called APC, which are an assistant principal and a counselor from each of the high schools. They work with Jackie Clayton and Mr. Asmussen, and they meet approximately monthly, and they did all the work on this, so they deserve all the credit.
Mrs. Christensen.
Yes, thank you. I also want to agree and concur with Ms. Wani's statement. Just thank you to everybody on the team, and I just really appreciate the direction that we're headed, just really preparing our students not just for college, but what happens after graduation if they decide to do trades. And so I just want to say kudos to all the team, and I am very pleased with the direction PV Schools is heading. I did speak to a colleague on the Mesa School Board, and I know they're doing the same thing. So I'm hoping the whole state will get on board with this, partnering with EVIT and the East Valley and West MEC, and just, some of the great changes that we're doing here. So kudos to PV Schools. Thank you all.
And Dr. Lim.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for being flexible on creating the longer timeline and starting this earlier in the process. If you know anything about my oldest, she is only going into 5th grade, but we're already talking about where she's going to high school. So these kids and parents are often thinking about these much earlier. So I appreciate you accelerating the timeline, because students are thinking about this long before they think about enrolling in those classes. So thank you for bringing up the timeline and really meeting the needs of the families in our district, so that students can feel prepared as they're selecting their classes. So while I know change is always challenging, I'm not a big fan of change either. I appreciate you being willing to make that change and really pivot how you guys are making these changes and bringing them earlier to our families.
Mrs. Greenberg.
Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone's been saying. This was a lot, and I think it was incredibly detailed, and I know that our students and families are going to appreciate it. And I'm a big proponent of getting as much information out there as early as we can, and I think this is a great way to go so that questions can be answered earlier, everything can be set in stone, and not set in stone, but everything can be well prepared for when it comes time to actually register. So I think this is a great step. Thanks.
And I'll just echo my colleagues here. It's great work you have all done. Especially poignant to me right now because my grandson might be enrolling in high school here real soon. Fingers crossed. Having said that, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Oh boy, my favorite. Next on the agenda is items for approval G5, acceptance of gift and donations. At this time, I would like to thank all of our donors and call out a few of our generous donors. I have my list right here. It seems like Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust has been very busy in our district. They've helped Cactus View, Campobello, Desert Shadows, Eagle Ridge, Go Ridge, Echo Mountain, Hidden Hills, Indian Bend, Larkspur, and one more, I believe, Palomino Primary School. They've given them money for various things like school clothing and shoes for students' needs, mostly. And yes, the total is about $12,000 for all those schools. So that's a nice chunk of change to help all of our students have a better experience here. Liberty Elementary PTO, they donated $1,225 for their Biztown field trip and bus transportation. APS donated $2,500 for their Phoenix Sun STEM teacher grants. I think I have another one here. Yeah. Thank you for your patience. Cheyenne Traditional School, NJHS, donated $2,500 for the site discretionary fund for Roadrunner School. And Sky Crossing got $1,375 from Art to Remember Incorporated for their site discretionary fund for art classes. Again, thank you all for this generosity. Again, it's the stuff that, it's the lubrication that keeps the district going, and we really appreciate that. May I have a motion for the acceptance of gifts and donations as presented?
So moved.
Any board member wishing to make a comment? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passed unanimously. That brings us to G6, which was previously on the approval agenda items. Pardon me? Yeah, it was F5, Human Resource Administration travel requests. Who's going to speak to that? Dr. Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I first want to say I appreciate your consideration of this continuing education opportunity for myself and our two human resources directors. I would share with you, you may or may not know that all three of us are certified by the Society for Human Resource Management, also known as SHRM. And their minimum annual requirement for continuing education works out to be about 20 hours per year. We do attend our state conferences, and that does not get us to that minimum benchmark. The addition of the national conference does get us just barely to that minimum state benchmark. You can imagine, it wouldn't surprise you, that in attending this conference, we will, all three of us will attend a variety of sessions that are related to the work that we do in human resources. And our continuing education in those areas is significant for the district. In particular, you may not think of this immediately, but a lot of the work that the three of us do is in the area of risk assessment and management. And with that comes financial risk. So we need to be good decision makers, and continuing education is a primary way that we stay sharp and we stay current. our decision making also can have impact on trust and culture in the district, which is also, I think, an important consideration. I will share with you, thinking about last year's conference, a couple of tangible things. Mr. Dawson was inspired by an onboarding session that he attended that resulted in ultimately in some work around streamlining our onboarding process. And I actually got to take part of that last week as a return to work employee. And so I will take a moment to thank our onboarding team for their work there. It actually, I found it to be a lot easier than I remember the first time around. AI was also a big topic of conversation, not surprisingly. And I will share with you that we are about to implement an AI solution that I would estimate is going to save about 150 to 160 hours a year of people's time. And if you're a believer that time is money, that's about $5,000 annually. So there are tangible benefits as well to us attending these conferences. So with that, I will answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. May I have a motion to approve Human Resources Administrative Travel Request, item G6?
So moved.
Discussion or questions from the school board? From Mrs. Christensen?
Yes. Thank you for that explanation. As we just approved a budget, and so we talked about SCR 1032 and how 60% of our operational expenses need to go to direct instructional expenses. And it seems like we're a little bit short pending the definition of what operational expenses are, but I am adamantly opposed to out-of-state travel. As you all know, I pull these things out all the time, but especially for administration, we need to really be putting dollars in the classroom. And I know that Maricopa County Superintendent Shelley Boggs, as well as Superintendent Horn, have plenty of classes, and they have stated time and time again that if any districts want continuous education, to let them know, and they can actually bring people in, and they do have budgets to do that. So I would really like to see us be a little bit more creative with these continuing educations and not go out of state travel. As you all know, I come from the corporate world, and when you have declining revenue, which we have declining enrollment, which means declining revenue, we do not do out of state travel. So I would just encourage us, I think that's low-hanging fruit in order to get us to that 60% operational expenditures on what our target is. So thank you. I didn't have any questions, just a comment.
Any other comments or questions? Dr. Lim?
I do have a question following up your comment that this brings you to your continuing education credit to keep that certification. Is it certification or accreditation? You don't need.
It's a professional certification.
Yeah, professional certification. So thinking about this, just to get a context of like, if this is the only option in the room. For example, we do continuing education credit in the healthcare space, and one of the hardest people to do it for is lawyers. The ability to set up a continuing education credits for them requires a lot more loopholes than it does for nurses and physicians to get that pre-approval for that continuing education credit. So we're very limited on, and we have to go through a bunch of extra hoops to make sure it meets the requirements for legal continuing education credit, which in given situations, we're happy to do that for big conferences for continuing education credit in your space. Is it something that's easy to set up, or does it require a certain parameter for it to meet the requirements for you to keep that certification?
Yeah, SHRM does have, SHRM has to evaluate it and accept it. They do in this particular case. We've already been through that process. They will approve it.
Okay, but I guess my understanding, and when it comes to like the webinars that we do, we tend to not do them for lawyers because we need to go through a lot more loopholes, but we do it for our conference annually for one of the nonprofits I assist with because it's such a big lift. So it's not just easy for you to find these. They're not just sitting around for you to like that are SHRM approved.
No, and I appreciate you that you mentioned the lawyer example because as with law and other professions, what you practice in that area is actually important. So human resources is not human resources, is not human resources. What we're striking for is very specifically related to public education.
Okay, so I guess it's not easy to find these
No.
things that meet those hour requirements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other Mrs. Christensen?
Yes. Thank you for that input. I will argue that we are one of the largest school districts in the state, and we can really think outside the box. We can bring people in here, share expenses with other districts, and do it in Arizona. We don't have to go out of state to have these trainings every time. I know for a fact that the superintendents of the state, Boggs and Horn, can facilitate bringing things in. We can share costs across districts, and that way it's not so expensive. So I think there are some ways to still continue to get continuing education with the same individuals and just leverage. That's what we need to be doing, just leverage and shared expenses to save our taxpayers some money. So, but thank you for bringing that up, and I think we can still invite them to come to Arizona, especially in the summer when everybody wants to be here. So I just would like us to consider alternative items for continuing education. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment? Ms. Swanee.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about the funding source, the indirect cost fund, and just give us a little bit of a big picture overview of what that budget looks like and when you set it and the kinds of things that are maybe even aside from professional development, what else might be funded by that same budget line? Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs. Wani, the indirect cost fund is funded through an indirect cost rate we can charge to our grants, our state and federal grants. It's allowable for us to take care of administrative and overhead costs. So most of the time, it's a very flexible fund, similar to our M&O fund in typical uses. So we have folks out of human resources in particular because they do hiring for our grant programs, both federal and state. We have folks in the business office who are funded out of there. So there's a few salaries that are funded out of there. And then I think that this travel is probably the only other thing that I can think of that's funded out of there. There may be a few other things.
And I will also share with you that this conference is coming to Phoenix in 2 years, so we will not be making this request 2 years from now.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Since you brought CLEs into it, now I'm just curious. What would happen? What would happen if you didn't meet the accreditation? I think you said it was 20 hours. Is it 20 hours?
Yeah, I mean, functionally, we would lose our certification, but that's I don't think as important as the ongoing.
The value, in other words.
It's the value of the conversations that we end up with other leaders across the state for the state conferences that we attend and across the country. And as an attorney yourself, the legal landscape is constantly changing. And we're constantly having to process what those changes mean in terms of employment. So the real value, I point out that we are in fact certified. We do that to give you some encouragement that that we take our profession seriously and we are committed to it. But the value is in what we learn and how we better process the many aspects of the employment world in public schools.
And you've attended this, I think you mentioned in the past. Is this something consistently, like this particular conference that we've had, the HR professionals attend?
Last year was the first year that we have attended it.
Okay.
And it really was a push out of our certification that we decided we needed to do that.
Say that last part again. It was.
Well, our certification drove us to be looking for more opportunities, and this was the most obvious and relatable opportunity.
Okay. And final question, I think. do you have like a deadline, like each year, when you have to have this, like it completed by, or? Does it depend?
Yes, I don't know off the top of my head. I believe it's coming up within the next month or two.
Mine's in less than 2 weeks, so I'm
But
scrambling, so I really appreciate.
But I can tell you, I know the hotel's already sold out.
Yeah.
So we're already looking in the area.
Okay, and you said, you don't know where, do we know where it's going to?
Which I can't do unless you approve it.
Okay, and do we know where it's going to be next year yet?
I think next year's Kansas City,
Okay, and then the year after Phoenix.
and then Phoenix.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mrs. Christensen?
Yes. How many people attended last year?
3.
3? And were they the same individuals that
Yes.
attended? Are there any other individuals that would benefit from this? Because, you know how much I like train the trainer type things. Why are we sending 3 individuals?
Because we are the 3 chief decision makers within the department. We are the ones that need to be on top of the issues in employment.
And one individual couldn't do that and disseminate that information to other people to perhaps save some taxpayer dollars?
I will tell you that most challenging issues that come through the department are nobody's making that decision alone. They are processing with at least one or both of the other of us.
And normally I look this up, but I failed to do it this time. Are there any online options for this conference?
No.
Because some of the conferences we do have that ability to do remote.
There are not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mrs. Greenberg?
No, I just want to say, I think the overlay of the fact that this provides continuing education credits is an important consideration. As someone who creates continuing medical education programs, I know that it's a very critical piece for any professional. So I also support that's why the request is to send Dr. Holmes and Mr. Dawson and Dr. Martin to, again, provide for those credits. And I don't have the information right in front of me. I don't recall that this was a tremendously high expense. If somebody could remind me, the estimated cost was what, about $3,000?
It's about
3,400.
Okay. I understand Mrs. Christensen's comments and thoughts about, perhaps bringing folks in. And I think, again, with the overlay of needing those the credits for certification, I'm not sure we would be able to do that for less than what the estimate is. So I think this is, a pretty important need to continue that certification. Thanks.
All right, then. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4 ayes to 1 nay. All right. Next on the agenda is call to the public. Please turn your attention to the video monitors for the next section.
Call to the Public is about to convene. This portion of today's meeting allows the public the opportunity to address the governing board. Although state law does not require that the governing board hold a call to the public, the Paradise Valley Unified School District and its board have chosen to do so because we believe it's important to hear about concerns and issues from our community. While Call to the Public is not designed to be a discussion, the board is here to listen. Due to Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot respond to, discuss, or take any action on items brought up during this time. However, staff members may be directed to get back to you and address individual concerns. As a reminder, the point of this and every board meeting is to accomplish the business at hand, and to be able to do so in an open and collaborative way. All in attendance are expected to observe meeting rules, as well as rules of politeness and decorum, so that we may serve as an example to our students that issues can be discussed in a respectful and civil manner.
Today, we have 3 comment cards that have been submitted prior to the start of the meeting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes for remarks. First will be Kira Kuo, followed by Stacy Harkrinder.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Kuo, and I'm here tonight to document on the public record the district's ongoing failure of mandatory reporting, contradictory statements made by administration in HR, and the district and this board's complicity in violating my civil rights through an unlawful communication ban. First, the district has numerous separate failures to report involving my child, including poisoning, physical handling by staff, racial slurs, and deliberate indifference. These are not misunderstandings. These are documented violations of state law, and the district has refused to answer a single factual question about them. Second, the district and board's violation of my civil rights through an unlawful communication ban. The superintendent claimed my emails were too detailed and challenging to respond to. He put this in writing. It is a superintendent's job to handle details, especially when those details involve child safety. Silencing parents because the truth is challenging is a violation of my civil rights. This plan violated Arizona attendance law, the Parents' Bill of Rights, my First and 14th Amendment rights, and my right to access my child's educational records. The district only reversed the attendance restriction on May 26 after I documented that the plan was illegal. But the fact remains, this board allowed an unconstitutional, overbroad, and vague communication ban to be issued against a patient reporting safety concerns and mandatory reporting failures. Third, the district still refuses to provide records or even resend them. The district continues to claim that all records were provided, yet refuses to resend them, forward them, attach them, or provide the original timestamps. A simple forward of the original email will resolve the issues in seconds. This refusal to resend strongly suggests the records were never provided and perhaps never created. This is a FERPA violation, a record-keeping failure, and a transparency failure. Tonight, I'm not asking this board to merely acknowledge these failures. I'm asking the board to provide the records, correct the violations, and take immediate corrective actions. You guys claim to be here for parents, and I hear a lot of words, but words without actions are just words. Please do something. I have been here so many times. Please. If the district cannot produce the records it claims to have sent, then the only conclusion is that the records do not exist, the district lied, and the board has been complicit by allowing these misrepresentations to stand uncorrected. Thank you.
Next is Stacy Harkrider. How do you say that name? I'm not saying your last name right, am I?
Harkrider.
Okay, thank you. And followed by Kelly Rosinski.
Just going to say that my daughter puts in some time, so at the end, even if the buzzer is gone, she would like to just come up and say hi through the thing, if that's okay. Should I go? Hi, I'm here kind of as a follow-up. Me and Kira have become friends. My story overshadows. She has her own issues with some safety concerns, but as far as the attendance thing, mine is mammoth in comparison to hers. I've already gone through the year of a restraining order. I've had to send other friends on field trips with my daughter. I'm in the exact same class as Amanda Lim's daughter. The most recent thing that happened in that class over at Whispering Wind that I heard about from another parent in that class is that they covered the teachers. They didn't follow through with what they need to for testing, so their testing scores were all thrown out. On the other hand, my daughter, who missed testing because she has excused 12 plus absences due to her academic avoidance and 12 disabilities that are not addressed on her IEP. She didn't come because they can't tell me who's going to help her with the testing, various things. But there is not equity. She did not test. She got kicked out of school. When I went to immediately re-enroll her, the McKinney law was not followed. I was asked for additional information and papers. She was still never put back in school. In fact, she was removed by the administrators at Whispering Wind after re-enrolled by your IEP team, or your IT team. So these kids are being physically removed through discrimination, just completely ignored and just told, and this is a child that I've done diligent work to go find her a specialty school. If Whispering Wind doesn't want her on the district's budget, she needs to be placed at an out-of-district placement. There's a school right on Bell. It's a mile from our house, and I've been here with the transportation issues. I can't cover it all in 3 minutes, but what I'm here to say is, like Kira, I still have not gotten the attention I deserve, but unlike her, I've been through due process, I've failed. My attorney, who was at all my IEP meetings, is now a state judge. These people get promoted. This problem is systemic abuse. It's all happening from within, and at this lowest level, I'm out here boots on the ground. I see Cassandra Christensen. She can vouch. I'm at all of our communal rallies. I am out here putting in the work, and you guys are not. My daughter is not just. You're right, she's not just. And you sit here and you talk about continued education. Where's the continued education for my child? This is a formal request that on your budget, you put my daughter in some continued education, something fun. She wants to go to summer school, but she can't even go to the educational summer school. I'm requesting that you get her in some community ed. I'm requesting you get her back on the books. I'm requesting that the principal at Whispering Wind does not refer to her as not one of our students. She is in fact a student of this district. She belongs in your district. Her address, you are her obligated, you have a duty of care. She is your student. And you've just abandoned her because she's missed too many days. And it's allowed. She's gonna continue to miss. She's not getting granted the continued certification and education that will allow her to stay employed within this district. But you're sitting here talking about making sure your teachers and all your administrators don't lose their certification. She's no longer certified to attend at PV school because you failed her. Come on up. You need to come up and say hi if you want to.
That's your,
Okay.
the time
She
limit.
changed her mind. This is a student who used to enjoy the microphone. And I was paying attention when your daughter
Thank
took
you
her
for your
second.
3 minutes is,
She went twice at the talent show, Miss Lynn.
expired.
Your daughter, the only student, she went twice. That's not equity.
Kelly Rosinski.
Bring it down, I'm a little shorter. Hi, I'm Kelly Rosinski. I'm the mother of 2 children at Paradise Valley High School. One's a rising freshman and the other's entering his senior year. We've actually had a very good experience in Paradise Valley Unified School District so far. What I would like to request is for the board to consider reassessing what their purchasing threshold is for requiring board approval, just to help with the board to keep track of the expenditures better, especially in the setting of decreased, money coming in with the decreased enrollment, and then also with the upcoming legislative changes requiring you to put 60% of the money towards direct instruction. So you're looking at trying to decrease expenses in non-instructional areas. And so I think it would be very helpful in order to better use the money, help to identify any potential areas of waste, help to meet the goals that you're all expressing, and meeting more of those instructional needs. I think a way to do it would be to decrease the threshold that requires board review and assessment. So whatever it's set at, I don't know if it's 100 or 150 right now for a lot of the expenditures, considering maybe bringing it down to 50 or 75,000 just to help keep an eye on things, and it helps with transparency. It helps taxpayers also to keep an eye on things a little bit better. So that's all I'm requesting. Thank you.
That concludes our calls to the public. Next on the agenda is items for discussion. I-1, Paradise Valley Unified School District demographic presentation. Mrs. Berrigan?
Thank you, President Pantera, Governing Board, and Dr. Corson. With us this evening, we have a familiar face to many of you, Mr. Rick Brammer, and he will be presenting an update on our demographic information. How long have you been doing? 15 years, maybe more?
Roughly.
Roughly. We'll go with roughly 15 years that he's been doing the demographic reports for our district, and he does it for many districts across the state, as well as other public entities, and has a great deal of expertise. And without further ado, I will let him share all of his interesting information. I'm going to say interesting because it's not all super positive, but I don't think any of it will be a surprise to any of us.
Thank you very much. President Pantera, members of the board, Dr. Curson, staff, and guests. It is our pleasure to be here tonight to present the results of the demographic update for this year. I do think that it has been a lot more fun to do this in the past than it is now. And just out of curiosity, how many people have seen my presentation? Because if somebody hasn't, then I go at a different speed in some ways. You've all seen it. I was at Flagstaff last week. I don't know if you caught the pre-proposal presentation that we did. But that was on big picture stuff. And this demographic stuff that is affecting you is not just affecting you. This is a national phenomenon that we're dealing with. It is more extreme in Arizona than almost anywhere else. But it is a national phenomenon. And in that conference that we did on last Friday on the 4th, which is why I was not able to be at your board meeting, one of the things that was really the big takeaway was that in the entire United States, the population under 18 peaked in 2010 and has been in decline ever since, slowly. And so while total population of the United States has been continuing to inch up slightly, the writing is on the wall that unless immigration policies are changed, and I'm not suggesting they should be, I'm just saying unless they are, the entire population of the United States will go into decline between 2080 and 2090. So we're going to have to get out of the mindset, a lot of us, of growth, and we're going to have to focus a lot more on sustainability. And you know, the rest of the world, most of the rest of the country has already been there for quite a long time. And we've been shielded from this in Arizona. And having worked in several other states, now I can see it and how pervasive it is. So the scope of the study is obviously analyzing all kinds of enrollment data, both for you and for alternative providers. We look carefully at the demographic characteristics of the existing population, because right now, at least, it's not about, really not much about new housing construction. It's about the aging of the population that's already here and the implications of that. Not to forget that there are substantial, Don Graves with our office does all of our residential development work. He ones that talks to the developers and the builders and the planners and assesses that. And this has been an odd district for many years. As you may know, I'm a district resident. I have been since 1994. So I've seen a fair amount of change. And what I haven't seen change staggers me more than what I've seen change. Because of the way the state land department manages and controls the supply of vacant land, essentially the district never experienced, you know, the level of growth that it would have originally had that sort of governor been put in place. So in a way, it's a good thing, but in a way, it's prevented the district from proceeding in a more logical manner. And you end up with this half of the district's empty and half of it's declining, and the other, you know, is growing. And it's been a difficult thing to manage. And Scottsdale and other districts have gone through it. We do projections for the district, but also for sub-district areas. And that's where we really get the accuracy, is by looking not only at the total district, but we have enrollment data, socioeconomic data for these planning grids. There's almost 400 of them inside the district. And we do have 15 years worth of enrollment information. So we're tracking how much, you know, what the trends are in individual neighborhoods, not just at the district level. And so this dot just shows how we get the data where there's an address for every student. We put them on a map. We can correlate them with housing. We can track how many are coming from outside the district, because you'll see dots that extend, of course, outside of the district map. And that's become an important part of projecting enrollment, is to look at that also attractiveness and where you're getting students from outside the district. If we go back and look sort of starting at the top with district enrollment, the blue bars are head count enrollment. It's not ADM. It's an apples to apples comparison of how many students were enrolled in the district on the 40th day of every year. The red line, the squiggly red line, is the year-over-year percent change, which is keyed to the right-hand axis. Unfortunately, during this period of time, since 2001, the district's declined by about 9,500 students. That's 28% of total enrollment, experiencing decline in 20 out of the last 25 years. And as it says in the second bullet, the decline in the population and the competition from charter schools actually started way back in the 2000s. And our enrollment really didn't decline much because the district was successful and had a good reputation and continued to grow that component that was coming in from outside. So enrollment, you were losing inside but gaining outside, and so everything seemed fine, and it really was until the demographics really started catching up with us and the birth rates really started catching up with us. And now we just can't keep up. You know, there isn't enough out there anywhere else to come to you either, because their populations are generally in decline. And not that it should make you feel all that much better, but misery loves company, and this chart shows you that on the left side, you know, the enrollment in most of the big established districts that, you know, that we serve anyway around the Phoenix metropolitan area. And other than Chandler, which was still growing all the way through COVID, you can see that the slope of these lines, the decline in every district, it's almost exactly parallel. So everyone has been experiencing this same sort of decline. And the chart on the right, by turning it into a percentage, cumulative percentage loss since 2010, really shows that. It puts you, you know, in the pack with, you know, with Scottsdale, and Tempe Union K-12 is where I take Tempe Elementary, Kyrene Elementary, and Tempe Union, pretend like that's a K-12 district to put it on the same par. But you can see all of those districts down just about 25% in the last 15 years. So some of it's demographics, and most of it has been choice. Now, the demographics is becoming more of an issue, but as we look at the distribution of enrollment by grade, you'll start to see how choice caught up with us. Because what this does is it looks at the average enrollment in a grade in each of these four groups. So if you go back to the beginning of the chart, K2 was already one of the smaller groups. I wish I had 10 years, but I do have it. I just didn't put it on here. But if you go back 10 years before this, K2 was by far the biggest group. And that's what happens when you have fast growth, is usually you're bringing in lots of younger kids. So by the time we get to here to the start of this time period in 2001, the rate of growth has already slowed. And what you see is the 9-12 cohort growing to be the largest. And that has become even a much wider spread for a number of different reasons. One is obviously the declining birth rates started affecting enrollment from the lower grades forward. So we're gonna see that. And then the other thing is that the charter schools, even though they had a huge impact, you know, they now serve over 20% of the students in the state, it has never been at the high school level what it has been at the K-8 level. And so we get a lot of students back now between 8th grade and 9th grade. So but way back when I used to do my little cohort survival model, and I'd look at my 8th grade class and think about how many 9th graders I was going to have. In absence of housing construction, it was about a 1.03 kind of a thing. And now it's closer to 1.2, 1.15 to 1.2. So there's a reason why that gap between those cohorts has widened. But as you can see, in the last 3 or 4 years, we now have all 4 cohorts in decline. And that's statewide. As of 2 years ago, the 9-12 numbers began to decline for the first time. And so we see enrollment in decline, like I said, across the state and across all 4 cohorts. The decline, though, in the K2 group in the last 3 years, I would bring to your attention, because the birth rate actually stopped going down in about 2000. In about 2020. So by now, we ought to be seeing some stabilization in the number of 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and enrollment is still falling. And as we're going to talk about, is we got used to charters, we knew what the impact was, and then we're going to come back, but in 22, 23, ESAs became universal. And that has really, again, put us on a whole different trajectory. Like we were already living with one thing, and now we've got a whole nother thing to decide how much of an impact it's ultimately going to have on us. But the fact that it's still pulling down that lowest cohort when it should be leveling is very concerning to me, because unfortunately these lines follow each other. You get on one line and count over 3 or 4 years and you're going to hit the next line. And so unfortunately it's, you know, the numbers are stacked against us at this point. I usually don't show a slide that has this many numbers on it. I promise there won't be a test. But this just shows the enrollment by grade going clear back to the year 2000. And the coloring shows how big the class was. So red classes are big, blue classes are small. And then I've got a couple of lines on there that start with kindergarten in 2004-05 and kindergarten in 12-13 were green. Those were individual peaks. Those are kindergarten peaks. And so the last kindergarten peak graduated high school in 24-25. And so now everything is happening is down. Every cohort shrinks. And so if you look at just at the bottom line here, is that this year we'll graduate somewhere on the order of 2,200 seniors, and 1,500 kindergartners will show up to take their place. So every year we're in a position of losing 700 students before anything else happens. So, you know, in years when we lose, it sounds horrible, but in years you lose less than 700, it's actually, there's some growth going on out there that's helping to offset that. There is some people still moving in. Now, the losses the last few years have been well in excess of 700. And again, we're going to come back and talk about what's been going on with ESAs and so forth. But structurally speaking, if nothing were to happen, you're going to lose 700 students. We tracked, as I said, enrollment at the sub-district level. This shows how many students the district is currently serving from each one of the planning grids. The red and the orange are the higher density areas, bigger numbers per grid. So the area west of the 51 and south of the 101 has historically been, you know, the most concentrated area of enrollment in the district. And then, of course, joined by the Desert Ridge community and more recently the Sky Crossing community with some very high population densities, where Don will talk about, you know, some of the activity over along Cave Creek Road and the Stone Creek Buttes area. You see those popping up, and there's some more coming online there. So there is some growth, but if you look at the last 5 years worth of enrollment change at the grid level, everywhere where it's blue on this map, enrollment has declined. And where it's red, it has increased. So really the only places that we have seen those increases are the 3 places I just talked about. You know, Sky Crossing, parts of Desert Ridge, and then the Stone Butte area. The Arabella project down at Tatum and Bell generated a few kids, but 50. They built 500 houses there. We got 50 kids out of that development. We probably got less than a third of the students who actually moved into that community. So, and in the terms of the demographics, whoops, I went one button too far, or maybe more. The overall demographics of the district, the population, that's the green bar. Population has continued to increase. So since 2000, from 230,000 up to over 288,000. The blue bars, the number of housing units in the district, again, continuing to increase. We continue to see cranes. We continue to see units being built. And the red line shows the percentage of the population, the percentage of that green that is under the age of 18. And that has declined from a full quarter of the total population of the district to less than a fifth of the population of the district. And the big culprit behind that is shown in the bottom chart, where we're looking at the distribution of householders by age. And the red part of that chart are households headed by someone under 55. And the green part is headed by people over 55. And so what do you see immediately? There's been no increase in the number of households headed by persons under 55 for 25 years. So we've had this constant aging of the population. And I even look at a subgroup below that, because the ones that really generate the most of the kids are owner-occupied houses under 55. And that's the blue line that's keyed to the right axis. So if we go clear back to 2000, 49.5%, half of all of the households in this district were headed by an owner under the age of 55, and now it's a quarter. And that is really what is, preventing us from having any growth from all of this housing that we're building, is the aging of the population and the prices that are causing the people who move in to also not bring the average down. So, and the birth rate thing keeps coming back to us, where Arizona, if you go back to 2005, the Arizona birth rate was about 20%. The red the squiggly line, not the bars. The blue line is kind of the one I like the best. But you go back and we were 20% above the United States average in terms of our birth rate prior to the Great Recession. And now we're 14% below. It's a 33% decline relative to the United States. That is second in the United States only to the state of Utah. And it's very interesting in that regard. But like I said, no one has experienced the type of declines really that we have during this period of time. And I think that makes the next subject even worse. I said at my conference speech that the advent of choice and charter schools, and I try to keep an open mind about all of it. And I think if all of it had come online while we were still in the mode where school-age population was growing, so the pot was getting bigger and we all got a piece of it, that would have been a lot easier to handle than where we are now, whereas the school-age population of the state is either fixed or declining, and we're increasing options. So guess what? Everybody gets a smaller piece of the pie. It's just incredibly simple, but that's exactly what's happened. So you can't, you can't afford or you can't help but lose. And because of the geography, because of affluence, you have a lot of alternative providers. Because one of the things about even charter schools, especially more back in the day, was you still had to provide transportation. You still had to have the ability to do that and the time to do that. So you have 24 charter schools operating in the district and within a mile of the district right now, enrolling over 9,000 students. They're not particularly growing, but they're not particularly declining either. There are 22 private schools operating in the district. Those have grown from about 3,700 students pre-ESA to about 4,400 students right now. Now, the thing about the growth in ESAs, and I know we keep alluding to that, is that private schools and charter schools generally don't operate with a lot of excess capacity. And so when it comes something like the ESA comes along, they can't just run out and build a whole new school. They can't afford to do that. And so originally that's what happened, is people went to the private schools. But we know that since then, the last 2 years, we've doubled the rate of homeschooling from 3% of enrollment to 6% of enrollment. So it's not really going into private schools now. It's really going into the homeschooling. The alternative providers are interesting just because the green dots are charter schools and the orange dots are private schools. And the private schools are entirely concentrated east of the 51, which basically tells you where the socioeconomic status supports private school education. We talked about, and I'm going to have one more I just want you to see. This is total public enrollment publicly funded enrollment in the district, in the state, other than ESAs. The red bar is in district schools. The blue part of the bar are charter schools. The green line is the ratio, the share that's in charter schools. And so what happened is that you could see after the Great Recession in 2007-8, there's like 100,000 student drop in enrollment, 150,000. 250,000 people left the state in the space of 18 months. Between the Great Recession and the impacts of SB 1070 and anti-immigration legislation, we had a huge exodus. And not only was it an exodus of just people, it was the people. It was the family people. And the people who came back weren't the same as the people who left. And so we never have gotten back to where enrollment was then, total for the state. And so what's happened is as the blue part of the bar has gotten bigger, the red part has had to get smaller. Up until, and the blue bar was growing up until the last 2 years. Notice that they actually lost 1,000 students last year and 3,000 students this year. First losses ever, even during COVID, for the charter school enrollment in the state. Those are ESAs. And there's papers out there that say that the ESA program has actually impacted charter schools more than it has district schools. So again, we're taking the same size pie and cutting it into more pieces. I'm going to probably skip this one. This just shows how your enrollment, this is enrollment in charter schools in the district by grade. So you can see how heavily weighted it is. That's what I really wanted to show you in the K-8, especially the K-6 group, where those cohorts are so much bigger than they are at the high school level. And that's why we're continually getting those kids back after ninth grade or after 8th grade. Empowerment scholarship accounts. In the state, I use first quarter data. As of this year, it was at the first quarter, it was around 94,000 students. That's up from about 11,000 prior to it becoming universal. The current number is at about 102,300 or so. So it's exceeded 100,000 people now in that program. And in the school district here, you can see we're now at about 3,500, up from 300 prior to them becoming universal. The first year, that first jump, that 2,000, we know that about 3/4 of those kids were already in a private school. They're the first ones at the door to sign up. After that, it's fallen to about half or less. So more and more of the increase, whatever it is coming at your expense. And that doesn't actually even include students you've never served, because they're measuring their percentages based on kids who left a district to go to an ESA. But if you're a kindergartner or pre-kindergartner, you were never in. So their percentages are even probably undercounting what's going on. Don's going to talk to us about residential development.
Okay, you've got a very mature housing market in the district, and what's happening and what's changing is both the type of development and the amount of development. And you have these two things that are going on, and it has an effect on, who's moving into the houses and whether that impacts, the school district. Now, in the last decade, we've had, close to 20,000 new housing units built in the last 10 years, but about 70% of them were multifamily. And last year, it was something like 90% of the new housing units in the district were multifamily. And these tend to be, high-end apartments, not really family-oriented. If you're paying $2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, you're probably not going to have a lot of families. And so that's been a lot of the development that has been going on, while single-family activity is at about an 8-year low in the district. Not a lot happening. Now, if you look at the map, we have these marked, the housing permits in the last year or year and a half, with blue markers for single-family and orange markers for multifamily. And you'll notice, there's a fair number of blue markers down in the southern or southeastern part of the district, but a lot of these are rebuilds. You know, they tear down a house and then rebuild it. You know, tear down a house and build a bigger house. And these are going to tend to be, you know, fairly expensive single-family houses. We have a lot of multifamily, and you know, a lot of it going up around Desert Ridge and up on Scottsdale Road, up by the 101. And again, you know, these are a lot of high-end, you know, multifamily. We do have some more single-family coming up off of, it's at the ridge at Stone Butte. It's off Cave Creek Road and up the northwestern part of the district. That's a D.R. Horton project that started up, and they just started building houses in about the fall of last year. And when I went there in April, they'd already sold 100 of those houses, and there were people moving in. So this is the start of some changes about what's being built in the district. The potential, we have a potential of about 54,000 additional housing units, but only about 45% of that is single family. And of the single family, about 85% of it is north of the 101. So if you're going to have, you know, significant single family growth, that's the area it's going to be. What you're going to have in the south is going to be more infill housing or multifamily. The kind of the yellowish areas, these big expanses up in the north, we still got a lot of it's, or in fact most of it, is state land. You have Azero, which is a project that's been in the planning stage for about 20 years. I have a plan on my office that's dated like 2008. Paradise Ridge, which is about that long. Desert Ridge, there's still quite a bit of land there. And this is all colored in this kind of this yellowish. This would be mostly single family, but it's very in the far north. The orange is multifamily. And you'll see there's still a lot of orange areas on the map. But this is going to be long-term development. And most of what's going to be coming into production in the next few years is not going to be built. It's going to be building out for a very long time. Which brings us to the timing, this is the interesting part. On here, red indicates something that's active. A subdivision is active is in red. In dark orange, it's what we expect to be coming online in the next couple of years. The lighter orange, say in the next 5 years. And we get up to this yellow colors, and that's in 5, 10 years, or maybe longer. And if you look, like I've said, we've been in single family at about an 8-year low right now. Okay, what's changing? Well, first off, what's not changing is multifamily. It's already a busy market in this district. It's going to continue to be a very strong market in this district. Over at Kierland, up at Scottsdale and the 101, Desert Ridge, these are all going to be building for years and years and years. So the multifamily is going to kind of keep doing what it's been doing. The big change that's happening for the district is in single family production. And there's a lot of issues that come on with the state land, and there's infrastructure issues. There are drainage issues that's going on because part of this land is in a wash. Part of it has, these 404 washes, So there's lots of different issues going on. What we have happening right now is we've got that ridge at Stone Butte. I mentioned it's up off Cave Creek Road. They have about another 1,100 houses to build. So that's going to be going on for the next 4 or 5 years. I expect them to build out in probably about 2031. Now, while that's going on, we have other projects that are coming. There's a project at Desert Ridge, right next to the resort. We expect them to start building somewhere between 350 houses or so. Expect that to start having houses in about 2028. There's another parcel over by the high school, the Blandford Homes purchased here a few months ago. There's probably going to be about 1,000, 1,200 houses. It's still in the planning stage, but we're expecting that to start house production probably in about 2029. There's another part of Desert Ridge on the east side that's had some problems with drainage and washes. That's being mitigated, and we're expecting the auction to come up in another couple of years, and we're expecting about 2030 to see development there. And also in about 2030, we expect to see that Azera project start. And the area it'll start will be over off Cave Creek Road. So in the first half of the projection period, you're really only going to have that one D.R. Horton project adding houses. But as you move on a few years out, you're going to eventually have 4 or 5 major master plan projects going at the same time. So you're going to be going and increase the single family production by like 50% over what it has been. So you're going to continue to have the multifamily you have been having. You're going to be having a lot more single family. You still aren't going to be enormous numbers, but it is going to be a lot higher than what it has been lately. And that will be continuing for a long time.
Thanks, Don. So as Don was talking about, this chart just shows the history and the projection, blue bars being single-family units, orange bars being multifamily units. You can see how basically the blue has not increased nearly as fast as the orange. And the blue isn't going to increase very fast in the next 5 years, as he was talking about. In the meantime, total population, the green has gone up, but the school-age population of the district has literally been flat. It's down about 2,000 students now since the 2020 census, but between the 2010 and the 2020 census, it only went down by about 400 students. It didn't go up either, but with all of the aging that is going on, it's remarkable that it even stayed the same. Enrollment, however, did not. And so what we immediately get into is comparing then the school-age population to our enrollment, which happens in the first sets of columns here. So the school-age population, let's just take 2010 as the starting point, 39,400 persons. That's all persons aged 5 to 17 living in the district, whether they go to your school or any school. They just happen to live here, okay? In that same year, district enrollment total was 32,742. So there was a net difference of 6,600. Now, some of that was because the district brought in 2,859 students from outside the district. So the in-district portion of enrollment was 29,883. How many of your students living in the district came to your schools? 29,883. And I compare that to the school-age population in that year, which was 39,411, the second column. So back in 2010, your service rate was 76%. 76% of the district school-age population came to one of your schools. May not have been their designated school, but they came to one of your schools. By 2020, as you can see, school-age population is actually up by like 100, so basically it's the same. But now in-district enrollment is down to 25,800, and the service rate is 65%. So basically ticking down at about, it's the service rate at about 1% per year. And of all the science that we do, the demographics and the development data and all that kind of stuff, it's a fairly scientific method and time-tested and proven. The part that isn't is the choice part. where you come down to, I can tell you what the school-age population is going to be of the district, but how many of them are going to choose to come to one of your schools? And that's where the wild card hits us. And so you saw it drop by 1% per year during the 2010s. It's dropped by about 1.7% since 2020 per year, especially since 2022 when the ESAs went universal. So now I'm looking, is it going to decline at 1% per year like it has been? Or is it going to be closer to 2% per year like it has been just in the last 5 years? And in order to try to determine what that actually means to the district is we look at scenarios then of the service rate. So if the service rate were to continue on that short-term, more extreme decline, closer to 1.5% to 2% per year, then service rate would fall all the way to 42.8%, and in-district enrollment would decline by over 6,200 people. Okay? I would consider that to be worst case. However, if you look at the actual annuals, the ones that are in bold, that really happened. So we really lost 1176 this year. So to only lose 955 next year is an improvement. And we know we're going to lose 700 because we've got a kindergarten and high school difference. So the long-term trend would have us getting only about a loss of about 600 or so. And if we could hold the school age, if we could hold the service rate stable at its current rate, then enrollment would go flat because school age population isn't really declining that much. And so that's our playground. And so what we've developed is what we call the forecast column, where I really think that we have to be prepared for the next 5 years to more or less follow the path that we've been on. However, I do think that ESA program will saturate and that we'll see that rate stabilize over time. So in the forecast, I follow the short-term, the steeper decline for the first 5 years and then a shallower decline for the second 5 years. Now, those are the numbers I would use to do, say, facility planning and so on for sure. But the short-term numbers are kind of the worst case to look at, from a fiscal standpoint. We do that, of course, not only at the district level, but across the grid so that we can look at schools. So this looks at the next 5 years. Again, continued enrollment declines in much of the district, but the areas that Don was talking about where we have some housing activity that's coming on, we'll definitely see some increases, but those will definitely also then accelerate more in that second 5-year period. So we can get out through 2030 somehow. I really think there's light at the end of the tunnel because there's definitely demand. Every time we've gone to market with something up there like Sky Crossing or the Stone Butte projects he's talking about where they sell 100 houses before anybody could even possibly move in. There is demand up there. The machine just has to start rolling. And so I really think that there's hope. Beyond the 5 years, there's hope. One of the things that you touched on, President Pantera, a little bit was the movement of students between schools. And so not only is there, a serious percentage of the students who don't come to any of your schools, once they come to a school, we have in-district open enrollment too, which is something, I'm only presenting it because it's something we have to try to take into account when we're, again, that other thing. We know how many kids there's going to be. Now, which school are they going to want to go to? The only good thing about it is these patterns don't actually shift all that much, but at the end of the day, only 60%, 59% of elementary students in the district go to their designated school of your students. So once you've got that subset that come to the district at all, then you've got 40% of them in movement, which makes it, again, harder to do staffing and enrollment projections and those kinds of things. And I happen to agree with you. I think I think it dissolves the cohesiveness that used to hold our neighborhoods together. But that's me being old-fashioned, probably. We have the same information, obviously, for the middle schools and the high schools. The level of movement's not quite as high, but it is fairly, it really is fairly extreme compared to most of the districts that we serve. And again, it's just something you have to take into account. And it benefits, at the end of the day, the net difference is quite dramatic. So take Desert Shadows Middle School, for instance, where there are only 380 students who live in that attendance area. Yet they have 801 students in the seats. So the net difference of positive 421, and 86 of those come from outside the district. So over 350 kids from in the district are choosing to go to that school also. So those, and you know, sometimes looking at why those things are happening is helpful, and sometimes it's not, but it's really a departure from just looking at kids where they live and adding it up and say, that's your enrollment. That's not what it's going to be. And it's an extra step in everything that we do. So we do the projections, you know, the demographic projections based on the grids. We take into account the open enrollment impacts you just saw to come to projections, history and projections of enrollment by school, not by attendance area, but by school. And so the first page, again, there's too many numbers to really talk about. The bottom line, we can see that between 2015 and 2020, the elementaries lost about 3,000 students. Between 2020 and 25, 1921. We're projecting that to continue for the next 5 years at about 1,900 before we pull out at the elementary level. I actually think by the end of the 10-year projection period, because of everything that he's saying and because of what I'm seeing with the birth rates, we'll finally see the elementary level enrollment in the district bottom. And then we'll have to work back up through the other grades. The only other thing I would say about these is that we've, in the past at least, looked at how many schools we had under 400 students. It's just kind of a consistent, don't think about it too much threshold, but from a financial standpoint, it kind of tends to work out. And so as of this year, 8 of the 25 elementaries are under that threshold. By these projections, next year it'll be 10 of the 25. And I know that you're looking at options in that regard, but unfortunately, it's showing in the numbers with that many campuses. You know, we have some very, very small schools in front of us. At the middle school level, had big enrollment declines between 2020 and 25 as we had some of the major decreases that had been in elementary school went through the middle school. Those declines will still be there, but not as bad in the next 10 years. But the high school level, it hasn't really gotten through that yet. You can still see we've got over 2,000 high schoolers. We've got 1,500 kindergartners in each grade. So unfortunately, it's the high school level that's probably going to take, you know, the biggest hit over the entire 10-year period because they won't be turning the corner by then yet. So obviously, in-district enrollment has declined. It's likely to continue to do so. Some of it's the aging of the population, but a lot of it has to do with service rate and choice. Out-of-district enrollment is stabilized for the time being, which is a good thing. It's a credit to the district that you're still drawing in roughly the same number you were before because there's fewer out there to get. If you were only getting the same share that you were getting before, that would be going down too. So that's actually a positive. I think one of the other things is we've seen that for sale and rental housing prices have gone ridiculous. It's priced everyone out, a lot of families out. However, I do think that it feels like they've peaked. We now have seen some pretty significant decreases in some of the asking rental rates over the last 6 months, and we're just starting to see declines. This is spring is home sales season, so there's a lot of houses on the market and a lot of sales right now, and I'm seeing selling prices coming in at 10% below asking prices for the first time in years. So I think there's some awareness, some softness out there in terms of the prices, which to me is a good thing in terms of how are my kids ever going to afford a house, you know. Potential for single-family development is huge. State Land Department, their system tends to slow things down, but as Dawn said, there's just practically the sky's the limit. It's just a matter of how fast they can get that machine rolling. The Azera project was an even bigger priority. We do a significant amount of work for the City of Phoenix Planning Department. And Azera was a bigger focus. Paradise Ridge was a bigger focus before TSMC came along. And so a lot of energy in the City of Phoenix has shifted to west of I-17 and Halo Vista. And doesn't mean these projects won't happen. It just means that their attention is now much more divided than it was before. So in the near term, we're afraid we're going to have declines in enrollment. I'd like to see it stabilize. I think it's possible by the end of the projection period, but we're going to have to be careful till then. I'll take any questions. Don will take questions.
Well, thank you. That's quite thorough. It's always good to have information, even if it's information that's not so happy to hear. I'll leave it up to who wants to go first. Comments? Mrs. Christensen?
Thank you. I really like numbers, so that was very informative. I just think that all of us up here and district leadership need to heed this, because this is not about our feelings or about hopium. These are real numbers, and data doesn't lie, math doesn't lie. And so, you know, one of the reasons I'm nickel and diming this district is I've seen this. I've seen the data. I look at all the demographic stuff. And it's frustrating that we continue to, you know, I feel like we are governing like we were 10, 15 years ago when we were growth. But my question to you is, while I do understand, we talked a lot about buildings, and it's my understanding that the permits are taking a lot longer too, because there's some red tape. I'm doing a lot of research on this particular project because I'm looking at how about getting housing costs down and things of that nature. But it's my understanding that between the red tape and the water concerns with the 100-year issues when these developments are going through, that these buildings are taking the single-family homes are taking a lot longer than projected. Are you finding that in your data? Because that's some of the data statewide that I've been investigating and reading.
It varies city to city, and it varies time to time, it seems like, when we get into these periods like this. The big red tape that's holding everything in your district up isn't the city of Phoenix. It's the state of Arizona and the land department and the way they function and their process, which is designed to protect the public interest, honestly. I mean, their charge is to maximize return on investment of the land for the taxpayer. The process, however, is painful.
So you're talking about the state trust land and how we manage, and the builders that come in and try to purchase and buy.
And try to buy chunks of it.
Yes.
And, you know, Don and I decided that we want to buy a square mile, and we do all the work to bring it to market. And then Tony comes in here and outbids us, and we lose all the money we invested in bringing that parcel to market. So it's a very dicey business.
Okay. Another question. You talked a lot about choice, ESAs, but it's my understanding that a big chunk of Paradise Valley goes to Scottsdale Unified, not just charters, but through other public schools as well. And we, you know, back and forth between Deer Valley and the neighboring districts. We're close to Cave Creek. Were you finding that? Because I was trying to read through as much as I
Well,
could,
and I don't
but is
publish
that
it.
minor?
I try not to publish because I get data from all the districts.
Sure.
From basically, I work for all of your neighbors too. So I can see what the ebb and flow is. And actually that data is published by the state now too. So you could see, and it's really interesting though, because yes, you lose more students to Scottsdale than Scottsdale loses to you. But if I look at you versus Deer Valley, it's the other way around. You get more out of Deer Valley than they get out of you. So there's a different ebb and flow on different edges of the district.
So you mentioned empowerment scholarship accounts a couple of times. So I hear time and time again that that is what's bankrupting our public schools. But if you look in and do a deep dive into the numbers, it's multifaceted. And
Yes.
It's not the fault of ESAs going universal. It is low birth rates. It is people that can no longer afford to move into at least Scottsdale Unified, Paradise Valley, the higher socioeconomic areas. And so that's what I'm hearing in your presentation, that it's not necessarily that, but it's just all of this. And so
It's been a big contributor, I would have to say, in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It's been a bigger piece of the puzzle. But you're absolutely right. When you see a shift like this, it's never caused by one thing.
Yeah, right.
We're getting ganged up on by birth rates and aging and
Right.
all of these other factors.
Yeah, and when I am out with talking to constituents, one of the things that I'm hearing for what we can do better as a school district, we have great programs. I mean, PV's a great school district. We have we have a lot of different types of programs, but what I am hearing is in terms of choice and some of the people that are choosing to homeschool is what we've heard today is in order for our students to do well, parents and teachers have to partner, and we're hearing the same parents come that we're ignoring and we're not listening. So I think we as a district can do better with some leadership and just partnering with our parents instead of ignoring. And I'm sorry I'm on that soapbox, but it's just, this is a lot, and I appreciate the data, but we need to act now and not wait for another 5 years, because you mentioned some of the our decline in enrollment and our low enrollment, I call them underutilized buildings. I had counted in a previous board meeting, we have about 42, I don't remember, it changes all the time. We have over 40 schools, but it was my understanding there was 22 of our schools that are under 500. So you mentioned that threshold of 400. 500 is a concern too, because they're dropping, and so we have lots of underutilized buildings in a market that is really expensive. This is an expensive market to maintain and to so are you finding that other school districts have a lot of underutilized buildings as well, our neighboring districts?
It's really interesting. Part of my presentation I did in Flagstaff was that the impact of charter schools in particular depended on how you were setting when they came into vogue. So I always pick on Glendale Elementary, one of my near and dear little districts, because they already were totally built out. They already had a seat for everybody who was ever going to be there. And then charters came along and took 40% of their students, so that meant that every charter school student emptied a seat in the district. Whereas out at Queen Creek, they grew with charter schools, and so they never overbuilt. Charter schools were part of the fabric from day one, and so the fact that they only have a service rate of 50 or 60% doesn't actually impact them financially because they never overbuilt, because they grew with them.
Yeah, and my last comment, I promise rest of the board members, I think this is a great district. We have great programs, and we need to really sell our things, but just really take heed. These are numbers. You can't make, do hopium, or certain feelings aren't going to make this go away. We just really have to make some tough decisions with this data that we have here in front of you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Dr. Lim?
Yeah, so when I look at this data, the part that strikes me is the aging in place population, which we know it's not a new phenomenon. It's just hitting our district really hard in, probably the last decade, but really in the last 5 years, we're seeing some of that highest decline because of that. Can you talk about either other states or other areas that have seen that aging in place population? And we know these individuals aren't going to move. We know the housing prices are so extremely high that moving somewhere else is really just not an option for any of these aging in place populations, which is different than maybe a decade ago or even 2 decades ago. So how are they coming up with creative solutions are there any districts coming up with creative solutions to make space for families to come in, given that those houses are not going to ever come to market? Or do we just wait till things are built?
I just don't, I think it's one of those things where it's just kind of beyond your control.
Yeah.
The market is going to do what the market's going to do. And I don't understand the apartment rents and so forth that I'm seeing. But I don't really think there's anything you can proactively do about it.
Okay.
I do know one thing, is that like I said, I'm a district resident. I've been in the same house for 30 years. But someday I'm going to move, either voluntarily or involuntarily, I am going to move. There will be turnover, and I'm a baby boomer. I'm at the end of that cycle, but I'm a baby boomer. And so there is going to come a time when we are going to see greater turnover in the housing units than we have seen now.
Yeah.
Because as you just said, I can't afford to buy my own house right now. So I'm darn sure not going to move out of it.
Yeah.
But someday I'm going to be forced to.
So are we seeing, so I think that is a bigger question, because I think that is happening to some of the districts in California, if I'm understanding correctly. They're seeing that turnover,
Yeah.
and they're actually having to reopen schools that have been closed for a very long time or in very bad shape. So as we think about that long-term plan, knowing that flip will come at some point and probably in a huge wave that we're potentially unprepared for, and I know that's what's happening in California, how do we begin to plan for that change, knowing that at some point these houses will turn over, probably in big waves at the same time?
The only thing I think, the best thing you can do is to hang on to your real estate. And you can do long-term leases even on land and so forth. But I saw that happen in downtown Phoenix when it rolled over, and all of a sudden people needed land again, and they were having to pay retail prices for it. So I think you could do something else with the land temporarily. And there are some sites that I do think it makes sense to sell, like on a super busy street corner. I'm just going to use that as if you had an elementary on a super busy street corner. Do you really want that school there, even if it did have kids in it? And it's worth a fortune because it's on a busy corner. I might sell that one. But, you got to pick and choose, and you got to make sure you've got a seat for everybody when that happens, because I don't think I'm going to be around, but I do think it's going to happen.
Great. Thank you.
Ms. Wani?
Thank you. So I really appreciated the deep dive into the development and the projections and what's going on. Based upon the planning and the permitting and the things that you've seen, the types of houses going up in some of the key spots that you indicated and that you've provided information about, are there certain areas where, again, just kind of based on everything that you've seen, where you anticipate there to be a higher generation of K through 12 kiddos? So we talked about some, most of the areas north of the 101 and Desert
Right.
Ridge and up in that area and Paradise Ridge and all of that.
The closer you can get to some higher density production type of housing, the more students they are going to get.
So would that basically include most of those?
Yeah, especially
areas
I'm hoping the Azera area in particular, much like what Horton is building. What's it called? Ridge at Stone Butte. And what are those going for?
I think they start in 4s or 5s.
So they're starting in the 4s or 5s, which I know still sounds like a lot of money, but considering Sky Crossing sold out in 18 months at over $600,000. we're looking for that $400,000 house. And if we can build a bunch of those, then we've got a chance.
Okay, and could you just give us a sense of how does our district sort of compare with some of the other districts with regard to like percentage or saturation of charters and private schools?
I think I kind of alluded to it. You guys have a higher than usual concentration. Most higher socioeconomic areas had more charter schools focus their efforts because people were more able to, and in some cases more interested, or at least more aware, let's put it that way, of their options than in some other places. But you know, different problems in different places. You know, Mesa has a huge, you know, stay-at-home population. And so when COVID hit and when ESAs hit, they jumped that wagon huge because of the kind of population that they had. So.
Yeah, okay, and then I think my final question for now is, when I first sort of reviewed the slide deck, one of the big questions I had, but you've I think mostly addressed, but I just want to make sure I fully understand, was the multifamily, right? And so it seems to be because of there's sort of super high end, maybe some snowbirds, so we're not thinking, they're not like the traditional sort of like affordable apartment complex or something like that, right?
No, well, that's what we've been looking for, is the courtyard apartment with a little pool in the middle, you know, and those kinds of, and that's generally not what we're building.
Like young, maybe young professionals or second sort of vacation type things. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
I'm saying that apartments in particular, they have decided who is going to move in before they build it. And it's built for a particular audience.
Right.
And so they're not building playgrounds, they're building gyms and concierge centers.
And rooftop pools and things.
And rooftop pools, yes. So it is the kind of area that we're in.
Yeah.
Now, in other parts of the valley and out in Buckeye, there is some, there's built to rent single family housing also. And Don could tell you more about it, but there's two forms. One of them are what I call the monopoly houses, like you see off I-17, where they're plotted like an apartment. So there's just one parcel, and they happen to be individual units, but it's really just like an apartment complex. But the other kind is where you're actually taking a plotted lot, in a, say, a 200 home subdivision, and one guy is going in and building all 200 houses and renting them out. And in some cases, those are helping affordability. At least it lets people get moved into the neighborhood, into a home.
And we haven't really identified anything that would kind of fall under that, under the multifamily within the boundaries of our district.
Not in our district, no. Although we can certainly watch for it. What do you think?
I know that in my neighborhood, a lot of the houses that are there are rentals, even though it's a neighborhood. You know, all my neighbors are renting their houses out. Is that something you take into consideration?
Well, we do, because we look at that as owners versus renters, and then the age. We structure, you know, do an age structuring of both groups, because it does tell us a lot about how many kids we might get.
Mrs. Greenberg, do you have a question or comment?
Not really any questions. Obviously, I've sat through a number of these reports and always appreciate the depth and breadth of the information. You know, certainly we're seeing trends that, as has been pointed out, hopefully we start seeing an uptick after another 5 years. But I also just want to say I appreciate that Dr. Corson has put together CPAC to really take these numbers and break them down in a very focused way and have a better idea and overview of how we can use these to move forward. I mean, you know, I've been hearing about the developments up in the Desert Ridge area for, you know, as many years as Rick has come and given these reports. So, you know, it's nice to know that there's movement in some areas that have been stalled, and hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, I agree with you. Mrs. Greenberg, you and I know we had to vote just recently to close a couple of schools, and how painful that is when we have this kind of data. At least people don't think we're just making this stuff up. We've got solid numbers to make some of these painful, hard decisions. I'm sorry, Dr. Lynn, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just actually wanted to follow up Ms. Wani's question and those kind of unique housing developments. Is because our home price all across the district, even some of our low-income areas, are at $500,000 for a single-family home. Is it just that our housing prices are so high that building something unique like that within our district space is just not viable for someone? Is it just we tend to want bigger homes with bigger lots in our district? They sell better, so we tend to build the higher-end homes. Like that model would be great. It would bring students into our district, but I'm wondering if we're not even on someone's radar, where in Buckeye that seems, given that the growing and the demographic, that fits kind of the demographic of what that area is growing at.
Everything becomes a function of the land values.
Yeah.
And our land values are going to be double what they are in Buckeye. And so to make your project pencil out, you either have to build a lot of density or expensive. As Don likes to say, a 2x4 costs the same amount of money whether you put it into $1 million house or a $100,000 house.
Yeah, and so I'm guessing we also see that factoring into the cost of our multifamilies as well for those rental markets.
Well, and especially since we've gotten so much new stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've just been swamped. And my only hope with the new stuff down the road a little bit is that those prices will come down a little bit. People who are in existing housing will move up into it, and then maybe it'll open up some space. But it's going to be a trickle down if we get anything out of it.
Yeah, and it takes time.
And it takes time. But they won't be new and bright and shiny forever.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about apartments.
Great. And thinking about that a little further, I know we have a number of mobile home units still within our district boundaries, actually within that loop. Do we expect to see, I know for a while there was not in our district, but in other spaces, there was a turnover of those spaces. Do we expect to see turnover of those spaces in our district, or for those to stay relatively stable?
I think that over time, every single one of them will go away. Now, there are a few that are individual lot owners. They're owned lots versus you're renting a space. And the individual owned ones will probably be there 100 years from now, because you're never going to get everyone to agree. But the ones that are parks, in mobile home parks, well, they've been disappearing out of Tempe like you can't even believe.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking about, is the changes that have happened within the Tempe space.
It's almost like looking at a parking lot to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Christensen?
Yeah, just to piggyback on your comment, part of the problem here in North Phoenix, North Scottsdale, we're pretty much landlocked, and between the high value of the lots and the property, and then the limitations on growth due to state trust lands. There's big north of the 101, there's that whole area that some builder would love to get their hands on, but it's state trust land, and it's
But it's
safe,
also
so-
economically driven too. Think about the jobs that we have created.
Yes.
Not we personally, but that have been created in the last 10 years along the 101. It's staggering. I mean, between American Express and Mayo, that has doubled and is going to triple, and it's money.
So
these are high-valued, high-paying jobs.
With the Cardinals moving in north of the 101, how is that going to affect things? Are they going to be doing with their practice fields something like Glendale? Is that going to?
I don't know, but if you're looking at your football teams, if they do for you what they did for Desert Vista High School out in Tempe, you might have some pretty good football players coming up.
Any other comments? All right, well, thank you for that presentation and answering all our tough questions. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, then, that's it, I guess. Before we adjourn, I would like to remind everyone that our next regular governing board meeting will be held on Thursday, August 6th, 2026, at 6:30 p.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned.